All right, welcome one and all to another magnificent Terran Tuesday. Yep, I'm sitting here on the floor once again because it's hot, hot, hot in the desert with
What?
111 degrees.
That's a little better.
Yeah,
Yep.
111 degrees or 43 Celsius, which is what I was going to
Yeah,
say. I got a little Celsius tracker here. Oh,
yeah, yeah. Because we talked
Nice.
about it before the
yes.
stream.
All right,
Yes, it
Moral Officer
was.
Grant, thank you for joining us.
Hello.
Hi, Gran. Hi,
But how are
Yeah.
Gran.
you guys doing today on this scorching Tuesday? How are you doing?
Oh yeah, scorching. It was scorching here. Like it was like for time it was 100 and something, 102, maybe 104 Celsius
Yeah,
here, Fahrenheit.
yeah.
So yeah, it was not nice. And it's like a bit of a boring day today. Uh, it's not for the lack of trying. I wrote stuff.
Yeah.
I edited stuff, but it's like the day, like the mood is boring. Was
You get
boring.
slow in the heat. You get slow in the heat.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's
The
hard to
heat.
think.
Yeah.
How about you, RH Snow? How have you been?
I
How
am
is the things outside?
melted. I am absolutely melted. Okay, it's my air conditioner is it's going home to Jesus. It now makes noises like every 30 seconds. It goes bong, and then it turns off. So I'm pretty sure I actually I do know for real. It's actually over 100 degrees in this house right now, as we speak,
Yikes!
with a humidity of like over 50%. It's amazing, and I'm really very excited about it because we used to live this way back in the days. Old people lived like this, although I don't know how. I said my mom when I was a kid, she got really mad because the bill was really high, and she turned off the air conditioner, and it stayed that way for 2 years. We didn't have air conditioning because literally she was just mad, and it was like
Mhm.
she grew up in the Great Depression, so nobody had like any air conditioning anyway. And she's like, I'm not paying whatever it was, $50 a month or something at the time. And so literally we were like dying, and it was over 100 degrees that summer for like 90 days. So I got used to that part, but it's still really hard. I don't like it. I like air conditioning. Air conditioning is awesome. So if you hear me over here just sort of lying in the corner, that's just me. I'm just laying here because it's too hot to think. And Black Knight's right. Like when I'm writing like this in the evening, it's cool. I'll actually come alive and I'll write a whole bunch. When it's this hot during the day, it's hard to
Yeah.
think of new stuff. So instead, I go back and I edit stuff I've already written, or I'll go back and rework dialogue, things like that. But coming up with new scenes and stuff is hard because you get really distracted by the fact that you just don't want to die of heat stroke.
Very
Yeah.
much so. Very hot.
Um,
I got that dry heat, but I'm sweating indoors as well today. So it is a little uncomfortable. But Black Knight, we talked behind the scenes of a possible opening subject. That was quite interesting.
yes.
Tell us
The
about
m-
go take it from here.
yeah the how should I call it? Some people are calling it the mud flood, but apparently, according to a lot of researchers, there was like uh, disaster, like a natural disaster, um, and it happened sometimes in the what we now know as the 19th century, um, and a lot of things changed. I can
Where was the mud flood geographically?
everywhere. There was a planetary event. It was not just and they call it the mud flood because the rains fell with a lot of like silt debris, and it created like thick layer of mud, which covered, like according to these theorists, it covered some of the first floors of the old buildings, and that's why you have these like the older buildings. You have the like perhaps parts of the bits of the their first floor windows, and you have like the road which almost covers them, and you have just a little bit sticking out. But there is no there is some sort of a uniform theory about it, but it's not like not all of the researchers are in agreement. Some like from the last bits of like from the last sources and their last bits of material that I was researching, reading, and watching before that event, that disaster, that natural disaster, which may or may not have been caused by force outside of our planet. It caused the doom of the giants. There was giants. They actually, some of the researchers call them the Greek civilization. Like they call them like that because they had apparently they had worldwide buildings, design, statues, and everything else, which was like it had a singular civilizational mark resembling ancient Greece, and that's why some of the researchers call them that. And apparently, humanity, we were their underclass. We were the servants, the workers, the foot soldiers, etc., and they were the masters. And so they had access to certain technologies, like if you remember if you watched Stargate, they had technology to attain electricity from the so-called ether. And that's why some of the old buildings had these strange metallic spikes on top, which are left over. They just like, when they were no longer useful, they were just, most of them were destroyed and only left to be used as lightning catchers. But apparently they had this technology, and everything was operated with this energy, this so-called free energy. But after that disaster, things changed, and the electricity could no longer be extracted. And the giants died. These rains, these so-called mud floods, covered lots of land. They semi-buried some cities. They ruined lots of, let's say, for example, they ruined the old Russian Empire that called Tartary. It ruined its waterways. They had like a huge, extensive waterway construction project, which lasted for centuries, but they had like an enormous network of waterways, which facilitated. They did not need, for the most part, they did not need trains. They had trains, and though these trains that it's like of the previous civilizations, their engines were different. Their engines were completely different. And part of the materials that I've explored and researched, the people who researched this, they claim that even the steam engines back then, they were attempts to reverse engineer the old technology, because people built the details, but they operated the already finished machines, but they had no idea how the higher technology which extracted the electricity from the ether worked. So, and Grand Tartary, that was actually the name of the old Russian Empire. And they, when the disaster hit, they lost all of their like 90% of their waterways, their extensive waterways with special, the special canals and the doors. What was I forgot the word.
The aqueducts.
No. The gates, the elevation gates.
Dams or.
You talking about locks?
Yeah.
Yeah, me.
The gateways, where you have like part of the canal is lower than the other part, and you have gates, and the ship enters
the canal.
Yeah. So they lost that, and they had to build. Railroads fast, and that's one of the reasons which these researchers say that that's one of the reasons why the Russian Empire back then was so backwards, because they lost all of their economic potential of like most of their transportation capability. And you had many cities which almost like died out to the last person, because they weren't able to get the regular food deliveries. It's let's say, if this happens right now, the big cities, our big cities, they'll probably die when the winter comes. Yeah, and that's the other thing that the second thing that they mentioned is that climate changed because of that thing that happened. Not just the ability of this ancient technology to extract electricity from the ether was ruined, but also climate changed, and the winters became really harsh. The winters before were not harsh; they were soft, quite soft. And that also caused the doom of a lot of people. But it's quite mysterious, because they, I'm not convinced. I mean, it's pretty convincing, but some of the things to me sound like a stretch, like a serious stretch, and this is coming from a man who dabbles in alternate histories and aliens and shit. But
which portions of it are a bit of a stretch?
Well, that part of with the giants, although some of them give circumstantial evidence that a lot of these like ancient buildings, these old, not ancient, but these old buildings you have, most of them are quite like the ceilings are enormous and the doors are large, and they use that to bolster their claims. But I'm not so convinced. Yeah, I know about different giants. Not, it's like if you did have this worldwide civilization with giants, when they died out, would have been insane effort to conceal all of their items, their clothing, and their bodies.
Yeah,
Though
that's for
there
sure.
are some weapons which are strange, and especially in Russia, there are rifles. Not 100% sure about that, even though I am more like I have knowledge of this, but I'm not sure that this could be a leftover technology. But there are like giant rifles which would fit. Well, it's impossible to fire as a human. That's insane. It's like the gun is like the rifle is bigger than you, and you can't even fire it with legs, stabilizing legs, and etc. It's like your hand cannot grab the trigger. Like you can't. It's impossible. It's as if it's created for an actual giant. It's not like let's say the anti-tank rifles of the Second World War and the First World War, which were clearly designed for humans. They're just really long rifles with high caliber, like the 50 cal today. It's nothing like that. It's absolutely insane. But yes, there are some intriguing, mysterious facts, and yeah, you can theorize, and some of the researchers who talk about the mud flood, they many of them know meteorology. They know
All right.
certain, like they use science. They use actual science, and one of them mentioned that if something would happen and you have like dust, huge amounts of dust from space coming from the space, what will happen when this dust is then deposited down through the atmosphere, and let's see, it's clay. He mentions that, yeah, that was like and they also told they after that they spoke about the black earth, the black soil, which for how long does it form, and that some researchers say that after this mud flood came, you can separate the cultural layer, which is the cultural layer is what we humans create with our trash, with the stuff that we throw away around our homes. That it's actually quite different from our activity. But yeah, it's absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, it definitely sounds deep. Snow, I know some of this had to get your mind jogging.
Actually, I was thinking about all the stories that we could write with the lost civilization conspiracies and thoughts and theories that we have out there, that whether they're real or not, there's so many things out there that we haven't ever even touched on. Atlantis is one. My dad was in love with lost civilizations, absolutely adored the subject. He said he was a big, he loved reading about Velikovsky and Worlds in Collision. He loved reading anything Eric von Daniken about aliens coming from outer space, even though he is this huge scientist, worked with NASA, actually helped create the Saturn V rocket, which will take man to the moon. He still loved these things because whether or not he believed they were true, the idea that you could think of these things and you could bring up these subjects and talk about it with people and they wouldn't get mad. At that time, you could talk about something like this and people wouldn't immediately jump on you and put a community note. They would let you talk about it for a minute and then they go, well, I don't believe that, or yeah, that sounds cool. And so the ability to talk about things openly and to throw out outlandish theories or maybe things that might even be true was a very important component of his thought process. And so he loved the Atlantis stories and everything else, but there's so many of them. The Tartary theory is just one of many. You have the ones of the ancient Indian civilizations, which of course go. I love that. I love the Elder Vedas. I believe that there's so much out there we don't understand about the ancient worlds, even before the proto-Hindu world. And as we look at what would be considered for most of us prehistory, when you go back to India and China, this is actually their history. It starts earlier for them than it does in the European theater for whatever reason. And we have historical components, for instance, the red-headed skeletons of Western China, where they actually have these tall, giants with the red hair and what looks like might even be Scottish kilts that are in the caves out there. Very fascinating and somewhat controversial. The same thing that we have within the North Americas, where we actually have tales of the giants there. And so, and we of course have the scripture from the Bible, which talks about, and in those days their giants walked the earth, and the Nephilim. And so as we go back to these ancient stories of lost civilizations and lost worlds, and of course then we have to move forward into Egypt, which has always fascinated so many people. I'm a big lover of Egyptian mythology, have read Wallace Budge's Egyptian Book of the Dead, and those stories, as everybody, for a little while there, everybody's like, there's nothing to it. It was Egypt. And yes, they go back so far that you are actually, Cleopatra is actually closer to our civilization than she is to the beginnings of Egyptian civilization. When we think of it that way, that's how long the Egyptians stretch back. And of course, Black Knight is obviously fascinated with it because he's written a whole series that helps star some of the Egyptian civilizations.
Oh, yes.
Yes. But as we look now, as they had that LiDAR scan that went down into the earth and shows these incredible structures, all of a sudden people's minds are lighting up again about it. And it's not just in the old world, it's also here with the mound civilizations, notably Serpent Mound, which I believe is in Illinois, and the Missouri Indians. And as
yes. It's I watched the documentary about it. It's amazing.
Fascinating, absolutely fascinating. And the amazing things that we know so little about. When we look at our own civilization, we think of all the ephemera that we have around us, papers and things that come in the mail no longer even exist. We now have everything, almost all of it's digital. Almost everything is digital. As a result, there's going to be very little left of what we have. And if you have biodegradable products that break down in the soil, people aren't going to find your things that were made of plastic 1,000 years from now. They're going to find a pile of dust. They aren't going to know what you have unless they actually dig up a vacuum tube from an older TV. All they're going to see
is a nuclear power plant.
Yes. Oh, and they'll find a nuclear power plant. They'll know that something happened out there. They'll probably think that was the end of the world when they're looking at that. But in reality, we have very little of ourselves left afterwards. Give the world 50 years and it starts to degrade. Give it another 100 years and you end up with a forest where civilization used to be. But we aren't making our civilizations out of giant stone blocks anymore. It's steel and concrete, but concrete crumbles. You may have the steel structures left, but steel will rust. What will remain of us in 5,000 years? It may be very little, if anything. And so as we look back and we think, well, certainly that wouldn't get lost. Certainly they wouldn't lose all of these parts of these civilizations. There must be more. The truth is, yes, that much can get lost. What we see are just the bones of these civilizations, the smallest details that manage to exist. For instance, like the Sumerian battery, which has been found, and have been other um, batteries found around the world. Actually, people have known about electricity for thousands of years. What did they use it for? We don't know. We don't know how they used it, because so much of what we of the documents that we have are the ones that are written in stone. But parchment and papyrus have been lost. Those things that they wrote upon are dead. The great library of Alexandria, which was truly a wonder of the world and held all the knowledge of mankind, was burned by those who deemed it unworthy of being there. As a result, we have lost this knowledge. So when people listen in and they think, oh, that's silly, there couldn't be a civilization like that. Well, maybe some of it's silly, but perhaps some of it holds a seed of truth or two, because these civilizations, some of them we've never even heard of, some we have never dreamed. They existed, they were real, and all that's left is that little bit of dust beneath your feet, the last remnants of a great, powerful civilization, of a kingdom that thrived over 5,000 years ago. Maybe the only thing that's left of it is that little bit of dust in the wind. But I know that James has written a great deal about this. And actually, and when we talk about lost civilizations and magics and things like this, the technologies that we use will seem like magic in the future and may even be rumored to be not real. It was impossible for a woman from Texas to just speak into the air and she would talk to a man from Bulgaria and a man from California without ever even being face to face. That will
At the
sound like,
same time.
at the same time, it will, and the people listened all over the world, it will sound like magic. And so when we're writing these worlds for ourselves, it would be extraordinary to have some of these storylines, especially the Tartary one. I think that actually we haven't explored that, and Chinese Tartary, which actually was a historical term of Mongolia and those places out there, the Tibet.
Yeah, that was I think one of the researchers said that that was they were part of it. That was like they were almost like a confederation,
Mm-hmm.
China and the Tartary Empire.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that they were like one and the same. They were super close. And another thing about it, it's like some of the researchers talked about the fact that there were rivers who, like artificial rivers, almost like dug, so that the Russian Tartary could exchange raw materials and goods with China.
Well, and that's
Otherwise, yeah, it's insane to even assume how they transport over these like massive mountain ranges and the Gobi Desert. And
well, it truly is fascinating even now to think about how we had done it in ages past. It was done. The Roman Empire is proof of that. We still have those roads because they're made of stone, but there are other roads that were put in that may have been kept cleared by human capital, that they may have had other machines that they used to put them in. But that as time goes, look around you and see here in the Americas, for instance, we have roads that have been abandoned only maybe 10 years and they almost completely disappear. Macadam actually, which is an asphalt or oil top type component, actually disappears quite quickly. One of the things we did in Watcher the Dams, and I talk about this a lot, about life after humans and what it looks like when things start to break down, and they do break down quickly. But a lot of it is something I've observed. I love old roads. I absolutely adore them. I love going down, finding a forgotten road, something that's been closed. I love finding old bridges and the ruins and the people that lived there and the houses and churches and schools that once existed on those old forgotten places. And when you go down those old roads, you realize how quickly they turn to ash. They break down. And these are things that were done in the last 50, 70 years, usually macadam. The old roads in America, the oldest ones I believe are around 120 to 150 years old. And some of them are still maintained today. But if you leave them be, they quickly degrade. Probably within 10 to 15 years, they start to break down. And as the grass and the trees take over, you won't even notice where they are. You'll look over and you'll see a mound. It looks like a ridge running alongside the road you're traveling. That's the old road. That's the one. Usually they would just come in and put down the new road. So the one that you're traveling on, the one that you're going back and forth to work each day, was actually the one that was built right beside the old one. And then they just moved it over, almost like a service road. They closed off the other one and it started to go back to nature. And so you'll see that little rise on the other side. Those are the roads from the 1910, 1920 period all the way through to the 1960s. But if you go back further and start really using your eyes as you come across these old roads, especially as you go back east, look for the valleys. You're actually going to see the ruts. Probably it'll be about 14 to 16 feet wide, where they used to take their wagon trains, and it created a rut that would actually go through the landscape. It's a compressed road. And so instead of being built up like a base where they would lay this asphalt on it, you would have this valley and a swale that would go through. And it would be about 12 feet wide, because as it got muddy, they would move over so they could take the horses and the wagons through and not get muddy. So the beaten down path, the well trodden path, is actually a sunken little valley that will continue on. And one of the most fascinating things to do is to go out and, Black Knight, you and I talked about this, since we're talking about lost civilizations. Let's go there. As we go to the Sahara, one of the most fascinating. To know that 5,000 to 8,000 years ago, this was a verdant plain, a savanna filled with animals and civilizations that have been all but forgotten, except for the pictographs that exist in the center of it all. And when you go to that place, when you go into those hills that still exist there, and you find the pictographs of the elephants and giraffes and cattle and people, and you see the roads that still exist to this day, you can look at those roads and see them from outer space on Google Earth. It is extraordinary to see the remnants of these civilizations. And when you look at them from outer space and you understand that they're not going to know that much about us either soon. So it begs us to go out and explore these forgotten worlds. Some of these so-called conspiracy theories or things that we've looked at, we need to write about those, maybe create a new world around them. There's so many wonderful things that we haven't explored.
Indeed, it's I shared a movie, like a documentary about Atlantis, which is made about a Greek man who translated, updated the translation, like some of the old translations of the account of Atlantis. And according to the new translation, they may have found like the actual state of Atlantis, which was in Africa. Yeah, because just like you just mentioned, so back then it was lush, rich in water. There were many rivers, huge lakes. Remnants of some of these lakes are still here. We can still see them on Google Maps. But back then everything was it was great to live. Like it was beautiful. And the documentary, they're not talking about high technology, they're not talking about aliens, they're not. It's just how King Bob, yeah, that's exactly that's they actually when they examined the new translation, they found how the ships were actually penetrating the interior of the Africa. There was a bay in what was that place? What was it was in Tunisia. Today's Tunisia. And I think it's called Gabes or something. But yeah, that's where the ships would enter, and because the translation was a lot of the mistakes and mistakenly translated words was fixed. It's plausible. It's much more plausible, and the travel distances are consistent with a row ship and sail ship technology. Well, as I said, like they're not looking at it through the lens of particle beam Atlantis or anti-gravity flying saucer Atlantis. No. They examine the normal version of Atlantis. So yeah, if you have the time, definitely watch it. It's well-made movie, and like from the point of me, who is exploring the much more mystical side of Atlantis and the alien side of Atlantis, it was refreshing to see how people who are even with their logical take on everything and like historical take on everything, they were still ridiculed. They were called crazies, pretty much. Yeah.
No, when you talked about the river, and I'm actually looking for Tamarasset, I believe is what it was called. Tamarasset River, huge, deep river, very wide at the time. And it did link all the way over to the bay in Tunisia, and this civilization that stretched across it had to have been thousands of miles. It extraordinary when you look at the structures that are around it, and of course one of them being the Eye of the Sahara, which is I can't ever say it right. It starts with an R. It's in Aoudain, the Remini structure. Do you know what that's called, James? I'm looking at it right now. I had to pull it up on the.
Unfortunately, I do not. I'm not big into geography, unfortunately.
All right, I'll pull it up right here because I'm actually looking at it right now.
Gotcha.
It's so huge, you can actually see it from outer space. And of course, it is a very famous structure. It's concentric circles. Many had considered perhaps that would have been Atlantis. But looking at it from the out, and of course, right now that's sort of discredited. They believe that it was actually an inland empire. That was perhaps this was just a natural formation. But it's an amazing structure geographically, geologically. Just the fact that you can see it from outer space, as huge as it is, although it appears to be natural, it's a reshot structure, is what it's called, RICHAT, and beautiful from outer space, of course. And on the inside, it looks like a series of mountain ranges, but you can see clearly the water running off of it. How water at one time had flowed around it in concentric circles, and of course they are amazing. Just to see this, to know that there's an ancient fortress actually that's inside of this structure itself. And if you look at it, you think, oh, this is just still a desert. Actually, you can look at where the old rivers ran by finding these trees that go along the riverine slopes. And even though you don't see water there, these are mesquites and the type of trees that have such a deep taproot that they will hit those ancient waters. And there are towns that have been there for thousands of years, in some form or another, still clinging to life where the river used to run. And when you find those, you're going to find those old roads. When you go to the rivers, you'll find the crossings because it'll widen out. You'll see where there's a place in the sand where the river used to run. And then you find this wash, sort of a spreading area. It looks like perhaps where cattle or people trampled at one point in vast numbers. And that will be your clue that that's where they had a town or something close by because they wanted a place to put those pens. And then you'll start to see the remnants of the fencing that was there. It is absolutely wonderful. If you can start there with a Richat structure, Richat, in the Sahara, and just look at it on Google Earth, and then start to see if you can see the old roads and the old rivers that used to run there. Once you do, you'll have your own ability to look up a lost civilization that to this day we still do not understand.
That's very cool. Definitely sounds like you guys dug really deep into this. I haven't really been down the lost civilization route, but I do find it interesting because just the civilizations we know of the past are magnificent, and their achievements could seem alien if it wasn't recorded for us.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
even just take the Aztecs, their entire civilization seems very alien, and it is recorded. And it wasn't that long ago, you know? And even then, the great remnants of their civilization has been primarily modernized and replaced with the majority of their ancestors not even in the same locations.
Not to mention the jungle ate like a
Yeah,
huge chunk of their cities.
yes, yes, absolutely.
And we can only now see them with LiDAR technology and
And the
other stuff.
Amazon as well.
Oh, yeah.
How
Yeah.
much those that one I did kind of look into, just the that they use lidar to find these places. Then they'd go on foot, and it would be so well covered that when they went on foot, they'd have to look for hours for these locations. And sometimes they would just find them by accident, knowing that they're there, but physically getting there and touching the buildings and stuff because there's just so much overgrowth. I remember hearing a story where they were looking for these structures that were supposed to be there. They knew it was there through LiDAR, and after a couple hours, near the end of the day, somebody ended up tripping on a rock that ended up being being like the head of a statue, and they were like near the top. That the entire pyramid was primarily just covered, and that statue was just like, if there
Sticking
was no,
out.
it was sticking out just barely, and they said that had to be like 15 feet tall or something like that. So there's
Yeah,
like, yeah, a
they
lot, it gets consumed by the jungle, things of that nature.
I think someone talked about like the cities on the Amazon. They had like how many millions of people living because there was a Spaniard. I forgot his name. Explorer who went, um, and he actually saw some of the cities. He was in contact with the people. He explored, mapped, and when he went back and he told the story about these giant cities, it's like all the cities of gold. They mocked him. They mocked him,
That
and
was
later,
Coronado. It probably is Coronado.
yeah, and later when they went there to find the cities, just like you said, James, they just found jungle. It was jungle because the people have already died. Mostly, researchers believe that they died because of like diseases that came with the Europeans, which to which
Yeah,
the people
foreign
had no,
disease.
yeah, foreign disease. They had no defense, and they died out. I think someone said that like the entire Amazonian uh, the area which they found like all of these cities, and they did like some calculations, some like approximations. They think that it was like over 50 million people. The civilization had like
Wow.
almost 50 million people.
Now they had to have some numbers.
Oh yeah, and they had like
At
artificially.
least a couple of thousand, I'd say. I say that because often, um, when it comes to a traveler going through the lands, he kind of just guesstimates the numbers he's seeing sometimes. So I'd say if it's a couple million, they say, I usually round it up to a couple thousand possibly. That's just me.
They also had this artificially created soil called now by scientists terra perta. I don't know if you read about it, but apparently because like jungle soil is super poor, it's not good for sustainable farming. The ancient people who had this civilization in the Amazon, they created their own artificial black earth, and they called it terra perta. They found and they researched it, like modern scientists researched it, and at first they assumed that it was natural, but later, when they used like advanced microscopes and stuff, they discovered that no, it was artificially created.
That
So they knew stuff.
yeah, that when we look at that kind of technology, things that we're not looking for, things that we don't recognize, it because we're not looking.
That's ancient technology.
Yes, the Anasazi Indians had much of the same situation. You have this thriving culture, large cities in the American Southwest, beautiful. It's stunning to go and look at how well crafted they are, created out of rock and put into the cliff face, kept cool in the summer by the rock itself, and the death of that civilization equally intriguing because a great drought occurs during the medieval warming period, actually, as the world changes. And climate change has always been with us. Nobody needs to scare you into thinking it's never happened. This was climate change that we, as much as
Heresy, how dare you?
how much like the Sahara once had been green and turned to desert. As the medieval warming period occurred, we have this sudden drought that takes place not only in the central deserts of the U.S., we also have it take place in the Central American regions as well, and may have contributed to the loss of those civilizations, notably the Inca, Olmec, and others. And so we see those great civilizations as they suddenly ran out of food and water. It's highly possible that the rains simply did not come down the way they had before. And much like with the Anasazi, how it appears that they died out because of the drought being so terrible that it literally killed all of the granaries that they had, the food that they had saved back. And they had saved back a lot. They had prepared in every way they could, but nobody was prepared for a 500-year drought that lasted long enough to destroy not only their own civilization, but even wipe out the remnants of it until no one remembered who it was that had been there before they were. Um, when we look at these great civilizations and we wonder, why did they die? It's important to know what happened to them, not just how they rose and the things that they used, but what took them down. Because when we look at those kind of things, we have to realize the same thing can happen to us. We feel like we're 10 foot tall and bulletproof because we have technology. But the truth is, if the lights go out, most people only have 3 days worth of food and they don't have enough water. And once those things happen, civilizations start to die.
I've read something. I've read a paper, or at least a part of the paper, about that the some of the things that you mentioned, that drought killed the Anasazi and others, and that happened not just once; it happened multiple times, and that's partly why their ancestors, like the more modern tribes, they abandoned like settlements and everything, and they became they adopted a more nomadic style of living and survival, because they were afraid of these droughts and these and that, like, oh yeah, I'm going to build a city, I'm going to have like these wonderful farms, and I'm going to store the food and everything, and then the drought will happen, and because I have I'm just living there, I have like this sedimentary society, I'm doomed, I'm going to die. And that's why the survivors may have like it's just a theory, but it's a logical theory. I don't know what you think about
I think you're right in that respect. We have forgotten how people stayed alive from these things because there's no way to record it. We don't know how they survived because their civilizations were in such chaos that even the simple act of writing something down or leaving a pictograph behind, if that's all they had, they didn't have time. Imagine how hard it was for them to put together a simple pictograph in the days when they were living in the Sahara. Perhaps they had other things. Perhaps they actually had books and paper or a means of writing. There's nothing left. There's nothing to go back and look at because those things have degraded with time. Even just the stumps of trees, there's nothing left in the Sahara right now except the bones of the earth. It's extraordinary to look at it. It's amazing to see it, but at the same time, it's very humbling. These things were literally erased off the map. Structures and trees and houses, the remnants of animals, everything gone. And when we think of it that way, we say, well, how can we prepare for something similar that might happen to our own civilization? What happens the day that we do have a massive, solar flare and it takes out the infrastructure and acts like a giant EMP? What happens when those things happen? One of the things that we can do with our literature is we can actually explore those themes. We can go in and say, what would happen to us? What would happen to this civilization if these things were taken away? What would occur if we no longer had access to electricity? If you couldn't start the engines again, if there wasn't a way to do it, if polarity reversed on the Earth, and that sounds like a conspiracy theory, but it is not. This happened over and over again, and it's people are not quite sure exactly what would happen. Scientists have talked about it at great length about polar flip, and that it might take a while for us to get things back on track because you have to reverse polarity on some things in order for them to work. What would happen to your GPS? What would happen to your ability to navigate the world around you if you couldn't look at your map on your phone? How many of you actually have a paper map? We talked about maps at one point, how important they are. How many of you know how to read a paper map? How many of you know how to look at it and actually plot your way? Can you find a paper map in your house right now if you needed to? If the answer is no, then you might want to think about it, because the truth is most people now have gone to where all their books are online, all their maps are online. If this little box that you're holding in your hands right now goes dead, how are you going to find your way around? How will you know where to go? And that's what happened to these ancient civilizations too. They relied heavily on their ruling classes, or they relied heavily on the technology that they had. The calendars of the Mayans and the Incas is legendary. The Aztecs themselves, having built on that same science of astronomy, creating these lavish and elaborate calendars that could be calculated out thousands of years, even millennia, ushering in the ages of Kali Yuga. There are things that happen that we can't even grasp right now. We don't know how to explain some of the ancient Greek devices that we have found. Ankythera, I believe, is what it's called, the device. That we don't know they used it. We don't know what they used it for. It could be something.
They theorized that was a very precise machine that was helping them with like astronomical calculations, so they could like map their navigation using the stars.
Yes, and even those ancient maps, as we go back, we've been talking about Antarctica a lot lately, because there's been some discoveries in Antarctica recently. The supposed just came out with a story about that, about finding what might be a tomb or some sort of device that's actually emitting a radio signal. It could be something that the Americans put back in there, in the 1920s, but we don't know what it is. Haven't found it yet. And as a result, I'm sure somebody actually knows what it is and they're not saying. But they have maps that show Antarctica in a whole different light. And people have said, well, they just didn't have it right. They didn't show it properly, but it shows Antarctica basically as a mountain range with a great sea in it. But if you had an ice cap
Are you
melt,
talking about the map of P race?
yes.
Yeah.
As we look at these maps, we think that they're inaccurate now. As possibly they were accurate for the time. They just are showing a different landscape because the climate was different.
True.
And the same thing happened when we talk about the Black Sea. A great flood occurred during the, I believe it's about 8,000 years ago, about the same time that the polar ice caps were melting. And we have a great flood take place near the Black Sea that actually washes through the strait, and it joins the seas together, the Caspian Sea and the Black Sea. And you have entire civilizations go down there, cities that are drowned beneath the surface. And there are amazing things around the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea also. Extraordinary civilizations that lived there that were buried under, like, kind of like what you've talked about with the mud floods, but in this case, a much earlier event. And they surmise that some of these things are what we talk about when we talk about Noah's flood, that this is actually related to those flooding events of that time. And that would have been what ushered in that warmer, drier period for Sahara, as the caps melted and everything becomes warmer the world over. And how does that happen? We don't even know. We know that there are astronomical and not astrological, let's get that straight, they're astronomical, actual scientific data that talks about long range climatology and how the earth will become warmer during periods of great solar activity, or when the sun goes quiet, that it actually can become much cooler during the Dalton and Maunder minimums. And we actually are probably looking at an event of cooling taking place in the next 50 years. It will be a second Dalton because we had a very quiet period of the sun about 5 to 10 years ago. And as a result, we're going to see that wave of cooler weather come through, and possibly some catastrophes that were much like what happened right during the Little Ice Age, which followed the medieval warming period. When we look at these things and how it affected our world in our own history, where there were great floods and the crops didn't grow for several years, and just one volcano erupting would cause so much sulfur dioxide to be emitted into the air that the earth would cool several degrees, resulting in crop failures around the world, which resulted in famines and starvation for so many. We know that happened in actual recorded history. We know that took place. We know that even when Mount Pinatubo erupted in the 1990, I believe it's early 1990s, 1993, that it actually cooled the Earth almost a degree and a half, and created a mini ice age in some of the northern latitudes where some crops failed during that period. So we have these things actually happening. We have those take place. When we look at these ancient civilizations and lost civilizations and the stories surrounding them, there's a fertile ground there. Just learning a little bit about your own history can yield these huge rewards for a person wishing to build their own worlds. You can find so many incredible things that would help you create a world around some of these civilizations and some of these stories, if you're only willing to look at those stories with an open mind and say, hey, maybe this part's true, maybe this other part's not, but wouldn't it make a fantastic story?
Oh yeah,
absolutely. It reminds me of you're talking about the things we lost. I think one of the ancient places of the world that still exists today is the Amazon. And there's ancient tribes there as well, and people who've lived there their whole lives. I remember hearing these stories, these gentlemen where, like, basically the Amazon provides everything. There's plants that are not found anywhere else in the world that they use for medicines, and whatever ailment you have, there is a wild green shrub out there somewhere that is meant to cure that ailment. And like you said, a lot of this is just knowledge that has been forgotten, and even today most people wouldn't even think about going to the wild to seek medicine, but that's where medicine comes from. And I think the Amazon is one of the last great places out there that's here in the Americas. You could technically drive to the Amazon, that we can pull a lot of inspiration from, because those ancient ways are still alive there.
Oh yes, and there are entire tribes that have not been contacted, or people have deliberately said we don't want to contact this tribe, and they're trying to protect them. for obvious reasons, because sometimes modern civilization is very cruel to
Yeah.
ancient tribes. But then we also have the story of the man who is the last of his tribe, and who keeps coming out, looking around, and seeing if anybody's left. He goes to the boundaries of where his tribe used to be, and then he goes back. What if he's actually looking for someone? But everybody pulls back because they don't want to interrupt him being the last of his kind. And he's living this lonely life all alone because it's being enforced, because we believe that's what he should be. And it's to be that person, to know that there's others pulling back and away from you because they don't want to mess up them enjoying seeing you as an emblem or a symbol of a lost civilization. But what if it's just a human wanting to reach out? And we have a tendency to dehumanize lost civilizations to a certain extent because we want to build the world, but we forget the people that live there too. And I think that's why it's certainly not a lost civilization, but the
Yeah.
world of Pompeii and Herculaneum. Pompeii, of course, being the famous uh, volcanic eruption that occurred, which buried the whole city in a hot blanket of ash. And it was rediscovered in the 1700s, 1800s, and they were just fascinated with it because to them this was a lost civilization. They had the remnants of it in the Roman Catholic Church and in the Orthodox Byzantine Church, but they did not have the actual documents and things until they went back and dug these things up. And when they start discovering it, it becomes a lost civilization for them, and they find the people of Pompeii. The greatest gift of Pompeii is not the buried mosaics or the buildings. We have those in ancient Rome and ancient Greece. What we didn't have were the people that were there. And to find them gathered together, huddling around each other, trying to protect each other, trying to protect strangers even. To find one that they found was an older woman, obviously they were buried in the mud in Herculaneum, and they found her ring, and as they said at the time, considering her to be older, she was in her 40s, and she had some obvious defects. She had a hunchback because she was had scoliosis and had some of her teeth missing, and yet she was beloved because she had rings and rich garments that they still found the remnants of it in her hair. And she had run into the soldiers' barracks to hide. And was she a patroness of the gladiators there? Did she run to find her lover? We don't know. Was her son there and she ran in to find him in that last moment? When we forget that they're actually people in these civilizations, that they not only enjoyed the spectacle and the glory of whatever technology it is that we've lost, but they were humans just like us. They had relationships and families and humanity of their own. And to find those small pieces is almost as great as finding a building itself. Because what are buildings if they have no one in them? We've actually found places where it seems like there was never much human action. Uh, Stonehenge is one of those places. We find the stones themselves. We find the inner and the outer rings. We find the ancient rings that were made of wood that are now long gone, except for the posts that remain. That you can see where the soil looks slightly different. But the humanity, it seems like we have a hard time finding the humanity in it. We can see where the sun rises and sets and it hits the standing stone perfectly during Midsummer's Eve. And the world stops and listens when that happens. But one of the most profound things that they've ever found there was a child's grave and a little toy hedgehog that someone had buried beside a 5-year-old. And in all this ancient world, where the great stones rose and fell, and somebody managed to get them there by water or by land, we don't know. But somebody thought the world, not as a sacrifice, because there's no ritualistic trappings around this child. There's just somebody mourning a 5-year-old and placing a little toy hedgehog made of stone into the bed and then covering them over gently and leaving it. And that is one of the only things we find of humanity in Stonehenge. But it means so much because it connects us to the people who raised and built these monuments. They weren't gods. They were people like us. They lived and mourned and died just like we do. And even as we are going to pass from this earth, we are a lost civilization to someone in the future. Somewhere, somebody will find something that belongs to you. What are they going to say about you when they find it? Will it be a story that you've written that's full of cussing and smut, or is it going to be a, a present that you got from your grandmother? Is it going to be a Bible or a cross, or will it be a trinket in your hair where you fell when the day came and the world ended? What are they going to find about us? I think about that sometimes when I'm writing with stories, and I think this may be the only thing that anyone ever knows about me. They may know absolutely nothing about me as a human being, except for one thing that may survive. And the truth is, even words and paper pass away. Unless it's perfectly preserved, it might not last that long. It will probably be something you were holding in your hand that meant the most to you, in the place where you fell or were buried. Something that will remind people that you were human and that you actually were real. And that's what we're finding in these incredible lost civilizations that we're now uncovering.
Yeah, definitely. Those things that we find are truly a gift. I say that because, often when I go down these historical rabbit holes, what I find is a lot of, um, what's the term, professionals who get very upset of the average person, says, you shouldn't touch this, you shouldn't encroach on that, you shouldn't go here, do that, because you're disturbing this or that. And I always think, none of what's in the past was meant for any of us here. People didn't build homes or toys so that archaeologists in the future can lay claim to them. The very notion that any human being can come across something of the past is a gift of the earth itself, because there's nothing more natural than inspecting something new, regardless of what creature you are. And that always kind of reminded me of that sort of notion that these institutions have claim to the past in a way that I just really been enjoying this conversation, and how I think the exploration of the past should be a broader discovery rather than one primarily kept for particular institutions and the like.
Yeah, they've actually started locking down some of these discussions. There's
Oh yeah.
a great outcry over archaeology lately, where they aren't even allowed to replicate a picture of human remains. So if they find a skeleton or they find the funerary artifacts, they aren't allowed to take a photograph and put it in now. In fact, there's been a great outcry about it. They're not allowed to record anything. One of the
But
reasons
that's
that
stupid.
they're wanting to lock it down for that particular institution, but also they're wanting to lock down any discussion. They don't want somebody like you or me to make some sort of offhand comment that might not be really true. It's like community noting everything. No one can say anything unless they say it's true. And even if I'm wrong, for me to be able to discuss it with fascination, and there's only one way to explore something, is to take a risk that you might be wrong, to take a risk that you might actually not have it right after all. That's what discovery is about, is discovering the truth. But you can't do it if you're afraid to say anything at all. And we now have a situation to where these great archaeology papers and the anthropology that has been undertaken in the last 200, 300 years, they are not only refusing to document and to put out photographs of human remains or skulls or skeletons or graves or any kind of thing that's discovered. They are also locking up ones that had been previously published. As a result, the result is becoming very hard to find this data. And as a person that has gone back and actually matched my own ancient DNA with some that has been found, for instance, there 4,000 years ago in Ireland, the Yamamaya culture in Russia, I go back to that one. Actually, Ustishim, I have a gene that I share with that. And I have loved looking back at those genetic components. The fact that I actually have 99%, and in the group of people where I've been compared, I have more Neanderthal genetics in my own genome than 99.9% of humanity. So if you, I guess I would be, what's the closest thing you might think of would look like a Neanderthal? Congratulations, me. I mean, like, 4'11" and squeak. But I can live in a cold climate. Good job. And they had red hair, so it's kind of cool. But we're no longer able to look at some of that data. We're no longer able to talk about the skulls or the grave goods that were found. They're locking it all down. And this is a tragedy. When you say they don't want anybody to share this unless they decide they want you to know. They have become the new priest class, where they will hide what is the knowledge. They will hide what is found out, and they're not going to let you know about it because you might not understand or you might not agree with them. So they are just going to not share it at all. And this is how civilizations die. This is how knowledge is lost. When a class of people decides that not just to teach and not just to preserve and curate, but instead to hide information about the history and the culture of a people, then we are truly lost, because we will not know our own history. We will not know our own genetic makeup. We will not know who we are as human beings. When they won't even let you define what a man or a woman is. What makes you think that they're going to share important data like a civilization where they actually did cure cancer? Or perhaps a book that they found that really does tell us what happened the day the flood occurred. We have the Bible. Wouldn't it be amazing if there was actually another document out there? Well, how will we ever know? Because they've decided they're going to hide information, and they will consider it a virtue. And you can look it up. It's actually out there. There was a great fuss about it regarding anthropology and archaeology. And the decision to not publish papers that actually had the visuals. And in fact, even going so far as to say that you cannot photograph a pictograph.
Interesting.
You can't even show a photograph of it.
I think a portion of this might be the archaic institutions and their archaic practices being challenged by technology itself, because for the longest time they had full access to these locations, and the best you had was a basic photograph that you can maybe print and show people, a drawing that people can come and see, you can put in a book. Now it's automatically shared on the internet and everybody can see it. And in a sense, they may be trying to commodify this to fight the future and say, we want to have the grasp of knowledge like we always did. Therefore, we're going to limit what's out there, so that way you have to come to us. You have to buy our books. You have to go to the lectures. Because the same thing popped in my head about, let's say, a grand university that you step in as a student and you're sitting down before a professor who's giving a lecture for the 50th, 60th time that year, just repeating himself. All that can be easily replaced with a video. And we see these archaic ways being stubbornly kept as we advanced. And I fear a portion of that may be to obtain that power that comes with exclusivity.
Yes, and also what Snow mentioned is because they have become a cult. They become a cult, a religion. And I'm not just, it's not just me saying it, it's many others, much more learned and credentialed people who are actually saying this, people from their own fields, academics, archaeologists too, and other scientists, because it's they have grown to believe that science is actually to be shared with the people, because it's if you don't, then what the fuck are you doing? Why what the hell are you even researching or studying stuff if not to share it with the people? But the thing here is that they want to control the access to information. They want to censor people who, not just people who offer alternative information, but even people who consider asking different questions, which could lead people to conclusions, to interesting conclusions, just like what we were doing until now on this series of conversations. They want to control everything. What you see, what you read, what you hear, and even what you think. Because if you control how people think, you have total control, and that is perhaps what they are aiming for. And this is why their failure will be it will be complete. It will be utter and complete, because you cannot do that for an extended period of time. It's like trying to hold a crack in the dam by just like shoving your fingers in it and hoping that the crack will not the wall eventually will not crumble, and you will not be drowned by the flooding waters. That's what they're doing.
I think that you're right about this. They're trying to hold back that knowledge for themselves. They want people to come to them, and this is not about ethics of handling graves properly. There have been grievous errors in the past. There have actually they put things together wrong. They actually just dug it up and didn't take care of the soil. They didn't do the forensics correctly, or they didn't do the excavations correctly. These are serious things, and they have to be addressed. In the world of university, that's what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to say, when you were allowed on site, how would you handle this? Is a grave of a human being, much like we talked about. These are not things for you to put on display, but we do it with Pompeii all the time. And actually, I've always had a problem with displaying a body of Pompeii. To move it and to put it as a museum piece, rather than just to let it be where it is and to have people go through and respectfully, look at it. There's a way to do it in such a manner that it becomes respectful. There's a way to do it in such a manner that it honors the culture from which it comes. And some people say, well, how would you feel if somebody dug up one of your ancestors and they, put them on display? Well, that's the thing. Would I actually know about it there? If I have been taking care of that graveyard and somebody just comes and digs it up and puts it somewhere else, that is a problem. If somebody comes and says, I would like to look at these graves, I want to find out what it was that killed this family in 1913. Where a whole family would go down. And that actually was 1913 through 1919. We see a great die-off, and it culminates actually with the Spanish flu, and what became known as the bird flu at the time. And when we looked at that, if they said, I want to come in and want to see what they were wearing, want to see what happened, we want to get a picture of this. And they did it in such a manner to be respectful, reinter the bodies, take a photograph. This is what photographs are for. This is what the documentation is for, is to make sure that you can do it in such a way that you can actually do it without disturbing the families and the culture, and still respect the place where it comes from. I wouldn't have a problem with that, because I know that if that means that my family member can actually help someone else live longer, could perhaps find a reason to show that they did exist, that they really were here, that I didn't just make them up out of whole cloth, it contributes to the knowledge of the people of that time. It is the only record that we have of some cultures to say that you cannot share it. And they even denied the native cultures their own access in some places, where they will only let certain people in, but they won't let the members of the tribes in. They won't let the people that have been living there for thousands of years come in. And that is in and of itself a grievous error. So this is not about somebody demanding that it be respected, or demanding that it be treated with the sensitivity that you need for a culture. It's about taking over the information, locking it down, and putting it away. And that benefits no one except the people who control the information.
Very true, and amongst them, I'm glad you brought up the whole cultural argument, because that's where a lot of it comes from. You hear them say, we're just trying to respect our culture, return these, they say that certain artifacts are stolen. But if we were to go back in time to when a lot of these artifacts were found, we'd see that they were essentially, these locations were up for sale. Whoever got there first would have got the hands on them, in my opinion. For them to be found and excavated by people who would put them in museums so they could be kept and well documented, for generations to come, is not a bad thing, nor is it I would say, a disgrace to culture, because many of them, like that, they're on display. The information that we found out about them is there, and they're well kept. Or at least we've been led to believe. We have this grandiose thought of museums that I don't know if there's any anti-museum arguments out there or anything, but for the most
Probably
part,
there are.
probably, but for the most part, I
Probably.
think they're a pretty good spot for many artifacts. And the more prestigious, and just because they're overseas or something, doesn't mean that these are being mistreated or anything of the sort. But with that, we got about 10 minutes left. Final thoughts, and where can people find you? We'll start off with you this time, Snow.
Oh, thank you. Well, of course, you can find me at watcherthedam.com, where I have all my books. I'm getting my free book back out there. Because I have it on Kindle Unlimited, I had to take the freebie off of there, so there's a broken link there. But we're going to try to get that back on there, so that way we can order those books. And I have now trying to get my store set up so we can sell all my books online on my own website, as well as on Amazon, where you can find all of them under R.H. Snow, Watcher of the Damned, where we talk about the lost civilization, which turns out to be our own. From, of course, in near future Texas, and the exploration of the fauna, the flora, and the culture itself from a near future standpoint of disaster and loss is an integral part of the story of Watcher the Damned. And I've loved writing it. And in fact, I just got my 8th book out. We finally got that on the market. Yay! I'm so excited. And
Congratulations.
I just did a soft launch. I just went ahead and went, it's on there, because I'm trying to get the series done. And so already into the 9th book by 110,000 words, which means I've got to make some edits. But we'll continue to explore, actually going into the cities this time. And I'm very excited to do that, as we've been out mostly in the country during most of the series. And we're fixing to head into the urban wastelands, where we'll be exploring some of the high rises and things that are still standing after the fall of humanity. So look me up there at watcherthedam.com, or if you want to go to my Flow page, where I have my links, it's at flow.page/rhsnow. That's flow.page/rhsnow, where you can also find me on my Substack with these wonderful people like Black Knight and James Esparza.
All right, Black Knight, how about you? What are some of your final thoughts, and where can people find you?
Well, I agree that for the most part, you better have the artifacts actually found, that you know them, you catalog them, you study them, and you preserve them. It's much, much, much better. Of course, there were some instances where said artifacts were obtained in a not so nice, quote unquote, way by, for example, I'm giving the example of the early so-called Egyptologists, who are just renamed grave robbers, who are just blowing up priceless constructions with dynamite, and just chopping the mummies with axes and sewing them, or even just burning them to melt the jewelry and then sell it to finance more expeditions. Obviously, these are retarded. We should not do that, because it's just loss of cultural heritage. So, that's it. I much rather have scientists not censor information and be a little more not so much how should I put it, assholes about other people thinking for themselves. Because even if and for the most part we will be wrong, we'll assume wrong things, because we don't have their access to information. And this is where we come again to the fucking access of historical data. Please stop censoring this. You may lose a different perspective of a different mind on a problem which you have been fighting with and grasping with ancient concepts which some person from, let's say, Scotland would like look at it. Hey, wait a minute! I just thought of this, and suddenly the problem might find a different solution. Yeah. So where you can find me on first among my friends on Substack, which would be Substack blackknight.com. And you can find my books on Amazon, which include all the Star Shatter books so far published, plus the 2 story collections, the anthologies, the second one, which is the Blood of Tyrants, and the first one is A Mandate of Sword and Dragon, and my 2 novellas about Valiant Autorian, the sci-fi Conan-esque novellas, and my one and only so far old school fantasy books, which is shallow fantasy, Lord of Bones. Yeah, so that's that.
Yay!
All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Thank all the regulars out there. Moral Officer Gran with their deviled eggs. We have King Bob losing civilizations in the couch.
Woo!
And each and every single one of you comes through for us every week. Thank you all. And hopefully you'll join us next week as well. If you're watching this on the replay, give us a like, leave a comment. We enjoy your company. But with that, we are out of here. Have yourself a wonderful rest of your day and stay cool out there because it's hot, hot, hot around the world.